we're going to try to just finish up with the duties of the husband, the duties of the man. I think we've done quite well with that. But there's just one or two more things I wanted to talk about, and then I wanted to talk about something else. So, if for any reason you cannot hear me, at some point just let me know. As we're experiencing the India factor, the center of technology, computer technology, programming for the world, but unfortunately internet connections are not always so great. So looking at one aspect of the male-female psychology, which Prabhupada talks about, is the nature of the man being independent, the nature of the woman being dependent. Now, someone may say, but there are many independent women, and there are many dependent men, and that's true. But it's not the natural, it's not the way it's supposed to be, and it's not natural. Man, by nature, is constituted in such a way that he can live quite happily independently. And women's nature is that they live quite happily dependently. And what you find is that young girls, for example, they'll, when they reach puberty or soon after teenage years, at least in a normal situation, they'll be thinking about marriage, maybe not seriously, but it's on their mind about when they'll get married and what they'll do and so on. At that age, men won't be thinking about that because their nature is to be more independent, and they're not. And so at that point, their need for women in terms of relationship is not strong. It's strong in terms of sex, but it's not strong in terms of relationship. What you find in our movement is that when a man joins as a brahmachari, then many of the men think in terms of remaining brahmachari. Some don't, but many do. And they're encouraged to do so, at least for a while. Some want to do it their entire life. Even the ones who want to do it their entire life may not be able to do it, but many of them think that way, or that's their focus, at least when they're younger devotees. But you generally find women don't think that way. They think, most of them, I'd say not all, but most of them after some point, a few years or so, or they hit a certain age, the higher percentage of them will be thinking more about marriage, because renunciation, thinking of a life of renunciation, for a woman is more something she'll think about when she's older. So just by her nature, the way she's wired, so to speak, is to be within a relationship, to have a husband, to be taken care of. And man, by nature, he's wired to take care of. That's just the way he is. But he can live quite easily independently. Generally it's his sexual needs draw him into relationship more than his relational needs. So Krishna created men to be providers, to take care of women, to take care of the family, and he created women more to be relational oriented, take care of the needs of the family in a different way. So that's just human psychology. But in our society today, you find that many men don't fulfill that role, and so the women are forced to fulfill that role, so they become more independent. And we had talked about this before, women's independence, feminism. And that was all caused by men not being men. So the women had to take those roles. So that the men got upset that women are taking male roles. Now, an interesting thing in Vedic society, at least we're told in Vedic society that it was normal that schooling would take place at the ashram of the guru, at least for the higher orders of society. So when they went to school, the boys went to school, they actually didn't live at home. And Prabhupada wanted that to happen in our movement, but it became a problem because it was difficult for a lot of these young boys and girls to be living away from their parents. Because it wasn't that their parents were always living in the community, many of the kids lived away from their parents lived in another city. But we are told, at least, within the Vedic society or Vedic culture, it actually worked. And the idea of the boy living in the ashram of his guru is that when a boy lives at home, he doesn't always learn how to be independent. His mother can spoil him, so he gets up and he throws his clothes on the floor, he doesn't make his bed, this, that, and the next thing, and the mother comes and cleans the mess up. And then she cooks for him and pampers him. And that's what mothers like to do. And so then you get this phenomena of mama's boy. He can't really function on his own because his mother did everything for him. And so when he grows up, he's not really mature. I was in Israel a few weeks ago. I don't know if I told you this, but it's quite interesting about this point. There's a devotee there, and he and his wife have a yoga center and Ayurvedic clinic in an Arab part of Israel, which means the non-Jewish part. And he told me that, I don't know if you're aware, but every Jewish boy and girl goes into the military in Israel, usually after high school, before college. They go in for 3 years, every man, every woman. So the Arabs don't. I guess they don't want to arm the Arabs, or they don't trust them or whatever, but the Arabs don't. And he said, you notice a huge difference between the Israeli boys and the Arab boys. He said the Arab boys are very immature. And the Israeli boys, after they go through the army, they become very mature. So it's the same idea of Gurukula. They go to Gurukula, and then they wash their own clothes, they clean everything, they do the cooking. They learn how to become independent. They learn how to become stronger. They learn how to become men, not big boys, but actually men. And so a lot of men today are just big boys. They're not really men. And therefore, the women have to wear, so to speak, the pants in the house. And so the women become more like men. And a lot of men don't mind that. They actually like it. And they let the women run the show, which is not, it's not naturally the way women would want it, and it's not naturally the way men should be. So that's the idea. That's one of the aspects of Gurukula, where a man learns to become independent, or it's just the nature of the ashram. So they become very strong, self-reliant. They develop the male qualities. So in the ideal, or I wouldn't say ideal, I would say in a natural setting, women are dependent, men are independent. Now, there was a study of women in the workplace. And even in women who are very well placed in the corporate world were asked, if you didn't need the money, would you work? Or would you prefer to stay at home and raise a family? And the vast majority of women said, I would prefer to stay home and raise a family, but I'm working because I need the money. But if I didn't need the money, I wouldn't work. So there is this idea that, you know, women want to do everything the men want to do. They want to compete. You know, they feel, you know, the men are doing so many things. Why should we not do them? And that's okay. But when you actually interview women and ask them, would you want to do these things if you didn't have to? Most of them say no. And what they find in, for example, in the business world, of course, like Anusha's a teacher, so that's more of a female job. But what they find in the business world is that it's very competitive, and if women are going to be successful in the business and the corporate world, they have to develop many manly qualities, because that's the nature of that game, you know, competitive, aggressive, and so forth. And those aren't natural womanly qualities. They find, like, for example, when women are CEOs, then people, they bring people together. That's more of their nature, relationship, where men are a little more domineering. So anyway, they find that women going into that environment is difficult for them because they have to take on that role. And for the teaching profession, you'll find it's mostly women because that's more of a nurturing role, so that's more natural. So that's another aspect of how women are sometimes put in unnatural positions. And then I also mentioned, I think I mentioned that they also found that when you put a woman in the same situation as a man, she'll, a stressful situation, a difficult situation, which is not congruent with her nature, she'll experience 4 times more stress than a man. So, men have a more aggressive, competitive nature. Sometimes they thrive on it. And so to go out and compete in the world to earn a living like that, it's more of a male thing. And in the Gurukula, the man learns everything that he needs to learn to be able to do that. And if you look at Vedic society, it's quite interesting. It's so much different than our society today, because in Vedic society, women weren't educated like the men, because they were meant to do something different. So now, of course, in our society today, men and women are educated in the same way. But even it's interesting. I'll tell you something. I don't know if you know this, Anusha. You'll find this interesting. But a lot of educators have proposed the idea that men or boys and girls should be taught separately. They're not thinking because they'll be more peaceful in the classroom if they're separated, but because they learn differently and they learn at different speeds. So what they find is girls learn languages faster than boys. Early on, boys have a much more difficult time with language, maybe through the whole schooling. Girls have an easier time, but boys have easier time with math, engineering, and so forth. Because there's a scientific reason, it's just the way the brain is wired. Men and women's brains are wired differently. And so more mechanical, spatial, engineering type things are easier for men in general, and the more creative, artistic, language areas, dance, music, girls will generally do better. So So I think the Muslims separate. Anusha's saying the Muslims separate. I think they separate just because they want to keep the boys and girls separated, so the boys can focus, because around the girls it's harder for the boys to focus. I'll talk about that in a minute. But this idea was because boys and girls learn differently, they excel at different things. So you could, for example, the girls would excel faster at languages if it was just girls, because they learn faster. And math, they would learn better if it was just girls, because they could learn at their own pace. And not get left out as you go on to the next level, which they may not clearly understand. So now we have to answer Achintya's, Mrs. Inconceivable. We have to answer her question about separating boys and girls. Of course, as we know, there's the Gurukula, and it's just boys. But, ladies, before I say anything about boys, you might want to get a bag, because this might make you vomit. Because although you may think you know something about boys and men, there's a lot you don't know, that you wouldn't know unless you're in a body of a man. But boys and girls they're wired differently, they have different hormones, different brains. This has all been studied, and it's being studied all the time. And by the way the brain is wired, there's different effects. The amount of estrogen, the amount of testosterone, it all affects male psychology. So one of the things that all men know by experience, but what they've found is because of the men have 10 or 20 times more testosterone than women, and if women had that much testosterone, they'd be more aggressive like men. So men are more aggressive, they're more competitive. You know, they get in physical fights more often, as in sports. You see this a lot in sports. I don't know about India, but in America, football or ice hockey, you see a lot of fighting. That's the aggressive testosterone nature of men. And men are wired sexually different than women. And the way men are wired sexually is visually, they become sexually stimulated by visuals, seeing the form of a woman. And there was one study done where a very beautiful woman asked men, would you have sex with me, just strangers? And 75% of the men said yes. And they did the same thing with a beautiful man with women, and none of the women said yes. So there's a joke, and the joke goes like this. Yes, Lolita is already vomiting, hearing this. This is really going to make you vomit, Lolita. Make sure you have your bag. After I say this, none of you are going to want to get married, and all of you are married are going to take a pen and hit your husband in the head and tell him to leave. At least give him bus fare if he's going to leave. Get him so he can get somewhere, back to his mother's house. So there's a joke. How do you know when a man is ready for sex? And the answer is, he's breathing. So the women are going, oh, come on. Well, for devotees it's different because we're controlling ourselves. And there are good men out there. But as a general principle, the joke is true. That's how men are wired. It's just they're predominating. That thought predominates them because it's a physical desire. It's not just a mental thing. So it's very healthy for men to go to a school where there are no women. And there's not that distraction. They can be very peaceful and they can focus. Because the brahmachari system and the Vedic system, as we know, is that generally marriages are arranged. So the boys and girls don't really have to intermingle and worry about it because it's going to be arranged and they'll figure out a good match so they're happy with it because they understand that if you have the elders involved in arranging the marriage, you're probably going to find somebody better than they would find themselves. And so they peacefully stay in Gurukul till about the age of 25. And at that point, if they want to get married, that's when they would leave the Gurukula. So the whole time they're grown up with men, they're learning how to become a man, they're learning how to get along with men, and they're also learning about women and their duties in grihastha life, but they're not engaging in any affairs with women, and so they become quite strong, and what's healthy about it is their view of women is not sexually based, so they learn how to respect women, and boys are completely distracted in school because boys are distracted visually, and unfortunately the way women dress now is very distracting and disturbing, and boys are just a mess basically. So let's see what you have to say. Chinta says, in Muslim we're taught something. Women loves lots of things, beauty, shopping, makeup, etc. However, man loves only one thing, that is woman, woman, woman. Prophet Muhammad said this. Yeah, okay. Chinta, it's time for a joke. Get out your vomit bags, women, because this will disgust you. And unfortunately, this joke is true in general. And I want to make a disclaimer about this joke, is that men who are trying to advance spiritually are able to control a physical desire, which is quite amazing. So here's a joke. A woman wants one man to fulfill her many desires, which is what Achinta said. She loves lots of things. Clothes, jewelry, nice shoes, nice this, that. And of course, every woman is different. Not every woman likes lots and lots of things, but in general, you see that. So, she wants one man to fulfill her many desires. She wants home, she wants children, she likes nice food, nice furniture, this and that. So she wants one man to fulfill her many desires. But man is different. He wants many women to fulfill his one desire. Yes? Vallabhi agrees. So, you like that joke? A woman wants one man to fulfill her many desires, and a man wants many women to fulfill his one desire. So, Vallabhi is saying, men are all about women and sex, and women and sex, and women and sex. It's true. They are wired that way, and Prabhupada even mentions that in the Bhagavatam. That's why there's polygamy. And he says because man's sexual desire is very strong. And so a man is wired in a way that he's not actually satisfied with one woman. So traditionally there's been polygamous marriages, because that's the nature of man. And so in our society we have monogamous relationships, which is not easy for men, which is why men often cheat on their wives. So, yeah, until death man will not stop looking at women. So that's just the way men are wired, unfortunately. They're wired to be polygamous. They like that. That's physically how they're wired, and they're visually attracted to women. Now I'm going to tell you something, ladies, that will make you vomit again. But I think it's important that you understand this, and I think it's important that in looking for a man that you make sure that he doesn't have these qualities, and for men you make sure you transcend these qualities. But statistics are, okay, the water pump has stopped. Wow. I'll answer your question, Achinta, in a second. Statistics are interesting about men cheating on their wives. They say about half the men cheat on their wives, which means they have an affair, which means that it's just a sexual affair. It's like, so how does a man look at the sexual affair? He looks at it much different than the wife, because for many women, if the man cheats on her, then she's finished with him. She can't deal with it. But when a man has an affair with a woman, in most cases, it's not a relationship affair. He actually doesn't want to leave his wife and kids. He loves his wife and kids. So his sexual affair is like, it sounds stupid, but it's almost like going out just to have some fun, like a sport, or going out to the bar and drinking, or going out and playing golf. It's just go out with this other woman and have sex. That's, as weird as that sounds to a woman, men can understand that, because it's like women, how can we explain it to you? Imagine you're starving to death, and you can't go another moment unless you eat something. And the food around the house is like, you've been eating the same thing for a long time. You want to go out and have something new. So that's kind of like the man, His wiring sexually is like you're starving to eat, and there's nothing in the house you want to eat, so you go out to get something different. So he just wants to go out and get something different. So you look at that and go, that's crazy, that's weird. Yeah, it is crazy and weird. But that's why 50% of the men do it. It's just they're so hungry for it. But when their wife will ask him, do you love this woman? He'll say, no, I love you. It's just about sex. So, now, you say, well, the devotee man do that. No, if he's a good devotee, he won't do that. If he's a good devotee, he will transcend that sexual need and desire. Because consciousness can override, the consciousness and the devotion and the transcendence you get in Krishna consciousness can actually override physical desire, which is quite interesting, looking at it from a scientific point of view. Because when you look at it from a scientific point of view, then scientists will say, no, it's just hormones acting, it's normal. But then there's this whole level of ethics and morality which controls it. So naturally, polygamous man ends up being a brahmachari for his entire life. How did he do that? Because he's just wired to have sex all the time. Men can do that. And now he's a celibate monk, so he's done it through consciousness. So it's not that men have to give in to their biology. It's just there, and they deal with it through consciousness. And Prabhupada, for example, he said, in Grihastha life there should be deity worship, because deity worship is purifying. It purifies lust, and that way they can remain pure. So now I'll get back to your questions in your chat. So Chinta made the point that until death a man he's wired to look at the beauty of women, and Prabhupada told that story about a man in the hospital. I think maybe he was on his deathbed, and he was visited by the Prime Minister along with the Prime Minister's daughter, and it was a lesson, or it was the king. The Prime Minister wanted to give him a lesson. So the king once said, "How long does sex desire last?" And the Prime Minister or his minister said, "It lasts until the end of life." And the king said, "I don't believe that." And so the minister said, "I'll show you." He said, "Come with me to the hospital, but bring your daughter." And so they went to the hospital. A man was in bed, or an older man in bed. And he said, "When we come in, look at the man, see what he looks at." And as soon as they came in, his eyes went right to the young, beautiful daughter. So then the king said, "Now, yeah, I understand what you're saying is true." And Prabhupada said that also. He said that physically the man may lose the desire, but it doesn't mean he loses the desire internally. So a lot of desires will vanish physically, but if we're not Krishna conscious, they'll remain. If I could do it, I would do it. And that's why this whole market of Viagra and other sexual stimulants, it's because the man gets older and his sexual energy, he loses it, but he doesn't lose the desire for it. And for a man who's Krishna conscious, if he loses his sexual energy, he'll think, "Oh, well, this is good because now I'm not disturbed by the strong pulling of the senses. So this is helpful." But a materialistic man, because he still has the desire for it, he thinks, "No, it's bad that I've lost it physically. I have to arouse it." So he'll take drugs or he'll do something to arouse it, which, from a Krishna conscious point of view, is complete insanity, because Krishna arranges that as we grow older, it's easier to become renounced, because the pushings and pullings of the senses, they calm down. So when you get older and your senses and desires calm down, you think, "Oh, this is good, because now I can be more Krishna conscious, I can be more peaceful, I can be more focused." But these foolish materialistic people think, "No, we have to agitate it again." So it's actually pathetic when you think about it, what's going on in modern society. And Prabhupada also explains that, or Ayurveda explains that if a man retains his semen throughout life, he'll be very strong and he'll have a powerful mind. But most men they're not retaining semen. They're having so much sex, so their body they're just weak. They become weak physically and mentally. It's a mess. So Prabhupada said, until his death, man won't stop looking. Polygamous is sexual attraction. Why Prabhupada allowed it? So, initially Prabhupada allowed it because he wanted to get all the women married. I think it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada said all the women should be married. But then he made an interesting statement in the next sentence, that all the men should be brahmachari. So what did he mean? He meant that ideally a woman will do better if she has a good husband, because, as we said, her nature is dependent. And a good husband means one who's steady and stable in Krishna consciousness, one who can guide her, and one who will take care of her. So it's just, she does very well in that situation. So then Prabhupada went on to say, generally there are more women in society than men, so polygamy was allowed so that every woman would be married. Now, Prabhupada said, if a man could take care of more than one wife financially, then he could do it. So he allowed it. And then they said, Prabhupada, but it's illegal. And then Prabhupada said, okay, then we can't do it. But he allowed it in principle, and it doesn't mean that it would have worked. A lot of things that, maybe not a lot of things, but some things that were Vedic, Prabhupada wanted us to do. He said you could do it, like, for example, the Gurukul. And so the kids were sent to the Gurukul, maybe thousands of miles away from their parents. But it didn't work, because just the kids they needed their parents, and the teachers were not trained well. It just didn't work. So, as I said, it worked in Vedic society, but it didn't work for us. So, now what we find, for example, in Mayapur we have a Gurukul, but most of the parents live there, and the boys live at the school, and they come home on the weekend for half a day or something. So there's still a connection that works better, or it works better when the boys are older. So with the Vedic, so Prabhupada said we could do it, and they said no, it's illegal, and then Prabhupada said we can't do it, but he explained. Then he also said, well, man's sexual desire is so strong that actually he wants to have many wives. And why? Okay, ladies, get your vomit bag out again. He said because he can have a lot of sex, because he has a lot of wives. Now that's not for devotees, he's talking about in society in general. And then another factor, Prabhupada said, is in Vedic society there were prostitutes. And then you think, oh my God, prostitutes, how could that be in Vedic society? So then Prabhupada explained, because man's sexual desire is so strong, if they're prostitutes, then he doesn't have to hunt down virgin girls and pollute them, which is what's going on in society today. Because most boys and girls, at least in America, they're having sex in high school. And so the ideal is a woman remains a virgin until married. So in order that the girls can remain virgins, they have prostitutes. So the lusty man who couldn't control himself, or who needed to cheat on his wife just because he needed something else to eat and he was really hungry, didn't hunt down and pollute poor innocent girls and make them think that he loves them and sweet-talk them and take them out to dinner, tell them how beautiful they are, and then have sex with them and then never see them again, which is what men do. So they just had prostitutes. So as weird as that seems, it actually works. And even more weird is some of those prostitutes were devotees. Don't get any ideas, but we have regular principles to follow, but those prostitutes were devotees. Not that any devotee woman would think of doing such a thing, but in those days it worked. So that's why Prabhupada allowed this. So the sexual desire of man is so strong that, as I said, that he can make a woman think that he loves her when actually he doesn't. He just loves her body. So ladies, whenever a man says, I love you, you have to ask a very important question. Do you love me or do you love my body? And if you want to get more direct and you're very bold, like all of you ladies out there, I know you are, you can ask, do you love me or do you love having sex with me? Now, if he's a bona fide materialistic man and he's honest, he'll just say, I love having sex with you. As far as hanging out with you, that gets kind of boring, and you like doing all your girly stuff. I'm not so interested. But as far as having sex, yeah, that's good. So this is why you find in relationships where they have this male-female relationships, they have this problem, because the guy is very attracted to the girl. He says, you're so beautiful, you're so wonderful, and she feels so good that this guy is loving her, because women they're wired to be loved by a man, and they think this guy's great. And then after a while, the sexual attraction goes away, and then they may realize they don't even like one another. And the guy doesn't have very great relationship skills, actually wasn't really interested in the girl other than sex, and the whole thing becomes a mess. Which is why, in Krishna consciousness, we recommend, if at all possible, marriages be arranged, and we recommend that we control our sexual desire, and that the arrangement of marriage is for a higher purpose, and sex is only for having kids. As weird as that sounds for the Western mind, it actually works really well if you can do it. Or the closer you can get to that ideal, the better it works, because then the relationship is you work together to be Krishna conscious, and it's not about a guy's going to marry a girl just because he likes the way she looks. That will be there to some degree, but that is not going to be the prominent thing. I mean, if he's not really attracted to her in any way, shape, or form, and every time he looks at her, he just thinks she's not very beautiful, that's probably not the best woman to marry. But if he's just making a judgment based on physical beauty, and that's like, on a scale of 1 to 10 of how important that is among other attributes, that's a 10, That's not good. That's not what it's about. So, when you see men like this, ladies, it's not their fault, it's actually their hormones. Now, some of you have noticed that some men are actually like women. We call them gay men, and some women are like men. We call them lesbians. Or in America, call them butch. And sometimes you'll see these men, they're very feminine. And sometimes they'll even wear makeup, and they'll be interested in things that women are interested in. And you'll find these women who will be like men. They're like men. They have short hair. They may like motorcycles. They like men stuff. They may be competitive. And so what they found hormonally is that those women have more testosterone, and those men, they have more female hormones in them. That's just so that's why they're more like women, and the men are more like men. So men, because of the high degree of testosterone in them, they have hair on their face, and their voices are lower, and they're more aggressive, but also they're more sexually oriented. So, like the joke is, how do you know a man's ready for sex? He's breathing. Women are not wired that way. Women are not ready for sex. With women, for them to be sexually aroused, although it's a weird topic to talk about, but I just have to make this point, is it's affection, it's relationship oriented, it's touching. Like for men sexual arousal is just visual, and it's not relationship oriented. That's why a man can just go to a prostitute and have sex and leave. And most women find that disgusting, and they can't understand that. So ladies, just understand that's how a man is wired. He's wired to have an extremely strong appetite for sex, and that way the species get procreated. So just a man who is able to control his sexual desire, you should have all respect for him, because it's really wonderful that he's doing that. It means he's in a very high level of consciousness. And if he can't, it's no wonder in our society where there's so much sexual stimulus, the way the women dress and in the advertising, the movies. It's really hard on guys. So women, just feel bad for these poor guys, and don't do anything to agitate them sexually. Of course, the women think, well, I'm not doing anything, they shouldn't be agitated. But in our society, women, they like to show their bodies off. And so that's agitating to the men, because that's how men are sexually attracted. So, So Lily says, you see these kind of men in Singapore, you see them everywhere. It's just, see, the thing is, a brahmachari is trained to see women as mother, he's trained to respect women, right? So, in my class in Sexual Purity for Men, one of the underlying principles is that a man has to learn to respect women. And when the sexual desire becomes strong, and a man starts to depersonalize women, and he just sees her as a means for fulfilling his sexual desire, which is completely disgusting to a woman. But the problem that women have is that the man says, I love you, and she believes it, when actually he doesn't even always realize it. It's just that he loves the sex, and she gives it to him. It's a huge mistake. As I say, a woman should never give sex to a man until she's married. And even after married, until she's convinced that he will stay with her, and it's not just about sex. So, because these poor men in Singapore and around the world were not trained to see women respectfully, but they saw women, rock stars, half-naked dancing. They saw women in pornographic movies and porn everywhere. They see women on billboards, half-naked. So much advertising is there with women half naked. And they even get encouraged by this by their fathers. It's terrible. So that's the stimulus they're getting. Plus, they're already wired sexually. So, without them learning to respect women, having some religious values, spiritual values, moral values, they have a really hard time with this. And that's why so many men cheat on their wives, and so many young boys, when they go on a date with a girl, they just want to have sex, and if she doesn't want to have it, sometimes they'll forcibly do it. They have so little control, because they're not seeing a woman as someone to respect, as goddess, as mother. They're seeing the woman more as an object, or as Prabhupada said, as a machine for sex. And it's really important that women understand this, so that you never end up with a man like that. Now, you might end up with a man who respects you and so forth, but he also sees you as a machine for sex. So both things can exist. But you really want to end up a man who respects you and respects your desires and needs, and who wants to be Krishna conscious, and who wants to use sex for having children, not for using you as a machine. So, ladies, understanding this, you can be, I don't know if the word is compassionate, but you can just understand that the male machine is much different than the female machine, the way it's wired sexually, and understand the troubles that the men have. And so unless man is grounded in extreme respect and honoring of woman, he'll tend to be overcome by his sexual desire. Even if he does respect and honor, at least if he respects and honors, he'll only have sex with his wife, and he'll take care of his wife. Now, this of course brings up the discussion of sex with one's wife, and we had discussed this in other classes, but I just wanted to throw out something. I don't know if we discussed contraception, but Prabhupada was against contraception, because we had discussed the idea that a broader definition of illicit sex, of no illicit sex, is that you keep sex to marriage. So you do it with your husband or wife. And that's a broad definition, not the strict definition, but a broader definition. And that would mean that you take responsibility, and if there's pregnancy, there's no abortion, and so forth. But Prabhupada was against contraception, because he said a soul is meant to be placed in a womb, but if you take contraceptions, then it can't develop. And he said by nature's law it was actually meant to be placed in that womb, and then you interfere with nature's law, which is a whole other topic. You say, but isn't it karma if I take contraception and he's not born? And Prabhupada's saying, no, it was his karma, and you did something unnatural. So this is a whole other topic, but just to throw this idea out that we can actually interfere with the laws of karma if we do crazy things. Isn't that an interesting thought? And that's what Prabhupada's saying here. This soul is destined to go in this woman's womb, but she takes contraception, so the soul is in the womb, but it can't develop a body. So Prabhupada said it's like you're in an apartment and you're meant to live there, but you're not allowed to live there. You move in and then they kick you out. So contraception is very sinful. And so this idea of illicit sex being no sex except for procreation, but the broader definition being illicit sex being keep it to marriage, but there's no contraception. So if a woman gets pregnant, there's no abortion, and you take responsibility. So that also would curb the desire, because you may already have enough kids, and you're thinking, oh, we don't need more kids. And then the husband, who's so sexually wired, says, yeah, but honey, but let's just do it during the time when you're not ovulating, and then we won't have kids. But a lot of times, she still gets pregnant. So it's just the way Krishna arranged it. So he arranged for a man and woman to stay married, to take care of kids, and that sex remain within marriage, and there would not be contraception. So all this stuff it's all this modern stuff. It's very sinful. And if there's no contraception, then the man just has to learn how to become controlled. But with contraception, nobody has to be controlled. And a man can learn how to be controlled, but if he doesn't try to control himself, he's basically out of control. She's just an animal, sexually. That's how he, so there is a balance, but it comes through Krishna consciousness. So, Wallaby, I said through consciousness, I didn't mean through masturbation. I meant a man, the physical and the mental, they're linked together. Just like when you're anxiety, you feel butterflies in your stomach, or you get a headache, your body feels weak, or if you're happy, you get a lot of energy. So the mental state of a man affects his physical state. So if he's more Krishna conscious, or he just has higher morals, if he respects women and so forth, they can control his nature. So when that beautiful woman comes and said, "Would you have sex with me?" they'll say, "No, why would I want to do that?" Even though his physical would like to do it, but he's in a higher consciousness. He says, "No, I don't relate with women that way. I relate respectfully, or I don't have sex. I only have sex with the woman I'm married to, and I'm not married, so I don't do it." So there's a whole movement in America called Promise Keepers. It's a Christian movement, and these are boys and girls who take vows of celibacy until they get married, which is a Christian principle. And so they do it as a support group. So through consciousness, we said, Prabhupada said, only through Krishna consciousness can you really control this desire. So we see that through consciousness you can control the physical. It's just a reality. A lot of people don't understand this. They'll say, no, you're just hormonal. These are your hormones. You're like this. But you can actually control your physical through your mental state. So a good man can do that, even though he's very sexually wired. He can control himself. That's what I meant. Man knows sex means sex. They do not commit. So that's the problem. When a man is very sexual, he may not commit. Or he may think he loves a woman because she's so beautiful, because this is a man's weakness. A man's weakness is that he equates beauty with love. And so he's feeling all this love, but it's actually lust. And then the woman who's not perceptive experiences this love as affection, and she thinks the man actually loves her. But again, he loves the sex with her. And so, women should say, if you love me so much, then don't have sex with me. This one devotee said that she had a boyfriend who was a fiancé, and she became married. Maybe before she became a devotee, but she didn't want to have sex. And so she said, "I'll marry you, but only sex to have kids." And he said, "No, I can't do that." So his love for her went about that far. So women, you could say, "Well, if you really love me, we're just going to have sex to have kids. Other than that, we're not going to do it." If that's what you want to do, and you're able to do that, which hopefully you should want to do and be able to do, see what he says. Because then, if he says, "No way," then certainly that's not the man you want to marry, because then, does he love you or does he love sex? That's the test. So, of course, this is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness, upon which it's based. And if we can do it, it works well, and we avoid so many problems. So, now, then we go to this point, I don't know if we discussed it, that sometimes in marriage, a man or a woman will say, we only having sex to have children, and we have 2 children, but I just can't control myself. I'm going crazy, and if I don't have sex, I'm going to go to a prostitute, I'm going to go with another woman, So that's disturbing to the relationship. It's not healthy. So in some cases, the partner, if it's, this will sound weird to some of you, but this is what most devotee counselors will recommend. If the main thing is to keep the relationship strong, because husband and wife should have a good relationship. They should be good parents for the children. So sometimes the husband and wife may have to give in order to satisfy the needs of the husband and wife to keep the relationship good. Now you might say, yuck, I'm not going to do that, that's terrible. But if it would cause your husband or wife to go off with another man or woman, then you need to do it to keep stability. And then accept the consequences, It's just, married life is complicated, and this is one of the most complicated aspects of it because of how we're wired. But the idea is to stay together and have a good relationship. Now I know some women will just say to their husbands, if that's what you want to do, get out of here, I don't want to see your dirty face anymore. But a more compassionate approach is you want to keep the marriage together and you want to fulfill his needs if it is a need which you could help him overcome by fulfilling it, because ultimately you want to help him overcome it. And again, women, these poor guys are so overflowing with testosterone, they're like, it's tough for them sometimes. Again, they can't control it if they're good devotees, and not every devotee man will end up in a situation where he's telling his wife, I have to have sex or I'm going to tear the house down. But sometimes, unfortunately, it's like that. And these are just realities, behind-the-scenes realities that some householder couples have to go through. Yeah. I mean, look at, okay, ladies, how is the sex industry so popular? I'm going to tell you something funny. You know Miss Universe. They have this Miss Universe contest, right? So part of the Miss Universe contest is that they're, you see them in bikinis or something. As far as I know, I don't really watch it, but so in Miss Universe, it's televised all over the world and it's really popular. But they have Mr. Universe, the guys with the big muscles that kind of look like gorillas and everything. Nobody watches that. It's not even televised. It's not attractive to anybody. Women don't look at these guys with muscles that are like 3 feet around and go, oh, I can't control myself. So women are not oriented that way. Men are oriented that way, sexually, by the eyes, to see these beautiful forms of women. So the pornography industry is huge for men. The male pornography industry is not used. You know who subscribes to male pornography? Gay men. That's the biggest takers, not women. And teenage girls who get posters of the young rock stars and boy stars in their underwear. That's about it. That's how far it goes. But men, they're obsessed. Young boys, if they can get an iPhone, they'll look at pornography when nobody's looking. That's just how they're wired. So that's why the sex industry is so big. It's because of those lusty guys. If men weren't lusty, there'd be no industry. Yeah. Okay, so Marina says, if you ask Krishna to take these desires from you, he really helps you. But yeah, it's true. And the thing about Krishna consciousness is it's sattva gun. So when you're in sattva gun, sexual desires weaken. The sexual desires come from the mode of passion. And so from the mode of passion, then we engage that passion by procreation of Krishna conscious children. Otherwise we remain in sattva gun. Yeah. So now, Achincha is saying, but I have certain desires, I want more money. Everybody wants more money, generally. But women, you take the male desire, men want more money when men like nice cars, but for men, gross sex desire is really important. But for women, it's not so important. Like the money, Achincha wants money because she wants to buy saris and have nice things at her home and nice jewelry and like that. That's women. If you talk about lust, male lust is sexual. Female lust is things. It's more having things and security, and she just likes being with her man, and she can embrace her man, and for hours, and it's not sexual. But you embrace a man, and in like 3 seconds, it's sexual. That's how they're wired. It's just unfortunate. I'm generalizing. For some men, maybe it's 4 seconds they can hold off. No, not all men are that bad, ladies. There are many nice men who can embrace you for more than 4 seconds without being sexual. But generally, that's the way they're wired, that, if a woman touches them and this and that, they get sexually aroused. Well, that's not the way it is for women. So women's lust is more for things. They like nice things. Man's lust is more gross, just sexual. That's just the way it is. So, Achinta, you're totally normal, and there's nothing wrong with you. And just make sure the man you're married knows you like nice things and has enough money in the bank to buy them, and everything will be fine. If he doesn't want to buy you nice things, you're going to be frustrated with him. So women like nice things. It's normal. There's nothing wrong with them. So, women, when you're older, 50, 60, your kids are grown up, then, okay. Then, you can live without the nice things. It's not so important. And how can you live without the nice things? Because you had them all your life. So you're okay. You're over it. It's not so important to you. Even non-devotee women, they come to that stage, a lot of them. So Wallaby says, nowadays most women have more sex desire than men. It may be, but it's not as gross. But women are also being programmed to be sexy, to have, for their own self-esteem, which is really sick. A woman looks beautiful dressed in a sari, covered. But now women think they look beautiful uncovered. That's their insecurity. So then it stimulates that sexual thing, and then women think, if the guy thinks she's attractive physically, then he loves her and she gets her self-esteem back up. It's all insecurity. Women who are overly dressed for sex, it's insecurity. They're wanting affection, so the guy gives her affection sexually, and she feels satisfied. So, and that's all being programmed in by modern society, that's what's considered beautiful, and you satisfy men this way. But most women are not naturally wired that way, to be that way. So just as men can control their sexual desire, women's sexual desire could be abnormally stimulated. So, yeah. So, and so Wallaby's she's in Adelaide. So, Adelaide's, it's a Western country, and then women, this thing also, Wallaby, it's interesting, because in the women's liberation movement or the feminist movement, it also, was the sexual freedom movement. So, the women wanted to be free to explore their sexuality, which is not really normal for women to be so open sexually, but their nature is to be chaste. So that broke it. They wanted to be like the men. The men are having sex freely. Why can't the women do it? And then the women, asking guys out on dates and being the aggressors. So it's like we were saying before, that because men become weak or become weird, or society becomes weak or strange, then the women start becoming like men. So then, because then it would make sense. Now the women are becoming like men, so then they'll become like men, aggressive sexually. But my point is that if you remove artificial influences of society, then the natural inclination of the woman is for affection and relationship, and the natural inclination of the man is more for protecting of the woman and domineering, and of course the sexual drive, which keeps him connected, which is sometimes I think, this may sound offensive, but I'm just I'm thinking that sometimes men have such men and women are so different, and sometimes it's so difficult for women to tolerate men, and it's so difficult for men to tolerate women. And sometimes when you're together, you think, why did I marry this jerk? I must have been crazy. Or the man's thinking, oh, these women, they don't understand anything, I just can't deal with this. And then sometimes I think, if the woman didn't have this dependent need, and if there wasn't this male-female attraction was so strong, and the male didn't have this strong sexual need, would men and women in their sober state, without those needs, just look and say, no, I don't want a relationship with this person, it's too difficult? I think in many cases that's what they would say. They would say, no, this is too difficult, it's too troublesome, which is how a brahmachari thinks. But men and women, they're not wired that way, because this is how the species are procreated. So men are wired in such a way that the physical attractions make them overlook all the inebrities of the female, and the female's need and dependency on this strong man take care of her makes her overlook his inebrities, which you become well aware of after you're married, which is why we're having this workshop, because after you're married, then you have to deal with all these inebrities, all these problems, because they do exist. But you can learn how to deal with them nicely. But it's a reality of marriage that they say that when you're in love, these hormones are secreted, and they make you blind to the faults of the other person. So it like bonds you together, and then you only become aware of the faults later, which is when you have to start working on developing relationship skills, because the person doesn't look as beautiful and as wonderful as they did before. So it's a mechanism to bring male and female together. And so you read in the Bhagavatam how this sexual attraction brings male and female together. And if that sexual attraction is not strong in a man, or that a female didn't have that dependency or need for that male guidance and protection, then most women wouldn't get married and most men wouldn't get married. That's why brahmacharis don't get married. They don't have that need. So the point of Krishna consciousness, the way Prabhupada explains, is because men and female are wired that way, there will be that attraction. They will come together. The brahmachari sees a woman in the temple he's attracted to, or a woman sees a man she's attracted to. It's natural. So Prabhupada's saying, because we're conditioned souls and because we're wired that way and the attraction will be there, now we have to learn how to make it Krishna conscious. But if we don't learn how to make it Krishna conscious, then we end up like the non-devotees, and we just, we run into so many problems in which the man is trying to enjoy and control his wife, the woman is getting frustrated, and so forth. So we're just dealing with these realities as conditioned souls, that this is the way the world was created. This male-female attraction is so strong. But if it wasn't so strong, then the world would finish. And souls have karma, and they're meant to come to this world, and someone has to be their parents. So if there wasn't this strong physical and emotional bonding and need, then men and women would just look at one another and say, well, it's better we remain separated. Life will be simpler and happier. That's brahmachari life. That's Mother Teresa. That's the nuns. They marry Jesus. Jesus becomes their husband. So most of us don't have that consciousness. We have the needs for a relationship with the opposite sex. So that's why it's so important to learn how to make it work in a way in which we're peaceful, so that we can, by this combination, have even more energy for serving Krishna. So that's an important principle, an important factor. So that's what we're talking about. So let's go down. First thing is, Chinta says, first thing, keep the marriage together if they have kids. Yeah, you should always want to keep it together. So you become very tolerant, and you facilitate your partner's need. And of course, those of you who are not married, who are here in these classes, it's extremely helpful, because you're getting a vision of what it means to be a good wife, and what it means for a man to be a good husband, so that the men will have some criteria in understanding who would be a good wife. The women have a criteria in understanding who would be a good husband. And so you can ask a lot of questions of your husband. How do you feel about this? If I did this, if I said that, what would you do? And Anusha and I, we had some fun with one man that she was chatting with about the possibility of this man being a husband for her, just beginning the relationship. And so I asked her to ask a few questions which could very easily upset a man, and he became upset by the questions. And I thought it was really good, because we very soon realized this man, in his present state, will make any woman quite miserable if he marries her. So there are key questions you can ask, such like, Prabhuji, Prabhupada says the husband should be the guru. How do you understand that? I understand it that she should be submissive and do whatever I say and not fight and be obedient. And I'm the guide. And you say, well, what about my guru? Well, I'm the guru in the house. You do what I say. So you understand and say, well, it was nice talking to you, and have a good life. And then you know that's the wrong person to be around. So through these classes, you can understand what qualities a man should have, what qualities a woman should have, so that in looking for a spouse, you can determine how many qualities this person has, or if he has or she has the important qualities. Now you say, what if you're already married? If you're already married, then you're basically just working on yourself. Before you're married, you're looking at the other person, you're checking it out. Just like before you decide who your guru is, you look. But once you decide, then you're just focusing on yourself as a disciple. So once you're married, then you're focusing on your duty as a husband or wife. It's just before you're married, you can be very critical. And not only can you be, you should be. So, we're a little behind on the chat. Okay, tolerate the partner's desire. You regulate from many to zero. Male gaze, look at man's body. Yeah. Because a male gay is like... he's a woman, and vice versa. He has the female nature mentally, and also physically in many ways. It's just he has a male form. It's a hormonal thing. It's totally hormonal. I want to tell you something that you're going to find really strange, but rats, when they're babies, their brains develop after they're born, whereas humans, their brains develop in the womb. So they did experiments with rats, and they gave rats, like male rats, female hormones in their brain, I guess, injected the part of the brain. Maybe Marina understands this better than I do. Anyway, we don't have to understand scientifically, but anyway, they injected female hormones in the brain, and they turned male rats they turned female rats, excuse me, the other way around. They injected male hormones in a female, and the female became a male. And then they actually found out that the Russians did this with humans. You couldn't do this in America without being taken to court. But they injected male or female hormones in the opposite sex in the womb, and they changed the sex of the person. So one of the things they're finding out about gay women or gay men and women is that there's a chromosome that's responsible for your maleness or femaleness, and some men have the female chromosome and some women have the male chromosome. And some women have little facial hairs, and their bodies are bigger and so forth. So there's a lot of chemistry around that, and that's why you'll see a gay man who's very feminine. Not all gay men are feminine looking, some are, but so there's a lot going on hormonally and chromosomally, and which is it's good to understand, because a lot of times we think that these gay men and women made choices, but many of them, that's just how they were born, and when they hit puberty, it all hits them. And you see them; they're like helplessly drawn to act like a man or a woman. And then you have another interesting phenomenon. When it goes to the extreme, then you'll get like a man who has completely, totally, 100% female subtle body. He's entirely a woman, but he has a physical body, and then they'll go for a sex change because he can't tolerate it. And it's such an identity crisis that 1 out of 5 men who are what we call transvestites, who want to be women, they commit suicide. They can't deal with it because they have everything female except the body. And it's just they can't control it. It's out of control. So, I have a question from Mayapur TV, Dustin, copied her. Dustin, Hare Krishna. Is it healthy to feel guilty for the emotion of lust itself or the inability to curb it? Very good question. I don't think it's healthy to feel guilty because of the emotion. It would be healthy to feel guilty if the emotion is misused. In other words, like Dustin is walking down the street. Dustin lives in Las Vegas. Okay, so let's say Dustin is working in Las Vegas somewhere, and he has to go to one of the casinos or hotels to do some work. And in the casino, there are women are half naked and this and that. And he just walks by one. He walks by many, but one in particular is just, whoa, oh my God, look at her. It's the right chemistry that vibrates with him. And then he goes home and he goes, I'm so bad, I'm so horrible. He gets out a hammer, he bangs his head, do some penance, he heats up some hot ghee. He goes, I'll just drink this hot ghee, And he hammers nails into wood. He goes, I'll sleep on wood tonight, I'll sleep on nails tonight. No. What Dustin should think is, wow, I was really attracted to her, and I'm so good a devotee. I just walked right out of that place and just said, I would never have anything to do with her. I want to be Krishna conscious. If I ever get married, I will be chaste and devoted to my wife. And no matter how attracted he was, he didn't do anything. So actually, Justin, you should feel good. You should feel like my wiring kicked in, my conditioning as a bona fide male being born in America who's been doused with infinite amounts of sexual stimulus. I did pretty good, because to be physically drawn through the eyes to a woman is so normal for a young man. It's like, don't kill yourself, you're just being normal. There's a story, Dustin, I don't know if you heard this. It's so good, and it'll answer your question also. I don't know the context of the conversation, but it must have been something about male-female attraction. It was a conversation with Prabhupada, and the devotee said, Prabhupada, I have no sex desire. And Prabhupada said, then you should go see a doctor. So it's like, you're a man and you have no sex desire. Well, you've got like physical problems. Go see a doctor. So for a man to be sexually stimulated by seeing a beautiful woman, a young man, that's just how he's wired. So the point, Dustin, is when you're more Krishna conscious, you won't probably even notice that woman. And if you did, even if you noticed she was beautiful, it'd be like, so what? Who cares? It won't matter. But as a bona fide American young man trying to be Krishna conscious, it's quite normal when you see that beautiful woman without half her clothes on. There's going to be some attraction. But I think rather than feel guilty, you should feel good that you didn't do anything, that you just processed it, you looked at it and you go, wow, she's beautiful and I shouldn't be looking at her, and I'm going to stop. And I'm going to stop looking at her and just keep on with my business. So you looked at her for 3 seconds and you went on. Well, that's good. You're a devotee. If you weren't a devotee, you would have looked a lot more than 3 seconds. In fact, you might have gone up to her and said, hey, what are you doing tonight? So now, Dustin's saying, well, but I should feel guilty because of the lust. No, you can feel the lust, you feel bad, that's normal. You should feel bad. Yeah, I feel bad because lust is a bad feeling. It's a feeling of being separated from Krishna. So in that sense, you will feel bad. So it's not even a question of should you feel guilty. You will feel bad that you did that. But you should also not feel so bad because you're wired like that. So it's kind of a combination of both. It's an acceptance. Okay, I'm wired, I'm a young man. I can guarantee you when you're my age, you'll feel your wiring will be different. How do I know? Because I was your age once and I know what the wiring's like. And it's just, you do, at a younger age, you have to put out more energy to overcome the wiring, because the wiring is more powerful. And in an older age, you have to do less, because the wiring's less powerful. It's the physical body calms down. It's just more the subtle body. And just like you see, grandparents. Grandparents are always giving. They don't want things for themselves. They got everything. So like Achincha's saying, I want nice things, but when Achincha's a grandmother, she'll be giving everything to her grandkids and giving away stuff, and she'll be dressing simply. She won't care anymore. So that's just, you go through those stages. So Dustin, when you're older, you won't care. I like this meditation, Dustin. It's a nice meditation. Imagine you were 1,000 years old right now, but you still have a young body. You look young, but your subtle body, your mind, your heart has 1,000 years of experience. So, Dustin, after living 1,000 years, you would have seen lots and lots of things in this world and have lots and lots of experiences, which would include having seen lots and lots of beautiful women come and grow old and die. And then the new ones come and look beautiful when they're young and get a little older and lose their beauty and get very old and completely lose their beauty and then die. And you would have seen that, for 1,000 years. So, after 1,000 years of seeing that, probably your attraction to the opposite sex would be fairly well neutralized. So that's what's going to happen to you when you get older. You've seen it enough. It's just like, okay. Been there, as we say in America, been there, done that, right? It's just, okay, I've seen it, I've had it. It's a nice meditation for anything you're attached to. Imagine you're 1,000 years old and you've had it for 1,000 years. Or you're attached to technology, so you've had 1,000 years of the latest gadget, and you start to realize the latest gadget isn't that great. And there's always going to be a greater one, which isn't that great. So it's an interesting perspective. And then you can think, actually, I've been around more than 1,000 years. I just forgot. So now, Dustin, if you completely give in to your lust and go up to that woman and say, here's $500, will you sleep with me tonight? Yeah. Should you feel guilty? You definitely should feel guilty, because that's wrong. And that you can control. But this spontaneous, like, this woman just showed up. She walked right in front of you, and you saw her. And then beep, 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 things start beeping in your body. How much control do you have of that? You have control now. Well, how are you going to deal with the beeping? That you have control. But the beeping sometimes you don't have control of. I was with a devotee. It was so funny. We were doing Sankirtan, and this was like 30 years ago or something. And there was a golf match. We were in Phoenix, Arizona, and there are big golf matches there. And so we went on the golf course, and there were 5 or 6 women that were, we call it Sankirtan, actually they were just collecting donations. I think they'd go up to people and they'd give them a pin of flour on their shirt and ask for a donation. Especially go up to the guys, tell them how handsome they are, and say, could you give a donation? And then Clint Eastwood, the famous movie star, was there. And one of the women saw him. She said, oh my God, he's so handsome. And I thought, you're a devotee. What are you talking about? I thought that was so funny that she said it, you know. And it's just like, you know. And then she went off and just continued doing Sankirtan. So it's like the beeping's going to be there. It's just the way we're wired. But what do you do after the beep? Now, if after the beep you give in, yes, you should feel guilty. If after the beep you don't give in, you should feel good and say, hey, I didn't give in. That's just the state you're in now. And then as you advance, then you go beyond that. Then maybe when you're more advanced, and then when it beeps, you'll think, oh, it shouldn't even be beeping. Then you can feel guilty that it's beeping. But in lower stages of bhakti, the devotee understands that all these desires are there. I'm not on the Nartha Nivritti stage. They're just there, so I just have to tolerate them. It's beeping, and I tolerate it, and you feel good. And say, you don't feel bad about the beeping, you feel good about the tolerating. So Clint Eastwood is beeping in her mind. Oh, he's so gorgeous. Oh my God. When I was young, I grew up in Los Angeles, and that's where all the movie production companies were there. And so one day my mother and I were driving. I was like 12 years old or something. We were going somewhere, and we drove by 20th Century Fox, or MGM, one of those big companies. And guess who walked out? None other than Elvis Presley. I don't know if you all know Elvis Presley, but Elvis Presley was kind of like called the king of rock and roll, and he was very attractive and used to shake his body, and all the women would scream. And then he walked out, and my mother said, oh my God, there's Elvis Presley, he's so gorgeous. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know what to think. But that's, did that mean my mother stopped the car, ran up to Elvis and say, run off with me, and left me in the car, for 3 hours? No, it was just a beep. But, she was a chaste woman devoted to my father, so it's just a beep, So if on lower stages things are beeping, it's normal. And if you're not giving into the beep, then you're cool. Dustin is cool. Don't kill yourself, Dustin. Don't. Yeah, you're okay. Dustin is okay. We still like Dustin. He lives in Las Vegas. Be careful, Dustin. Prabhu, a bomb question. Why from a brahmachari you wanted to get married? Very good question. Because this question was asked to Virabahu Prabhu. I don't know if you know Virabahu. He's a grihasta, and he's also a guru. And he gave such a nice answer. He said, because it's natural. And so the best way I could describe it is that I would say there's 2 kinds of men that come to Krishna consciousness. The one kind of man who is by nature renounced, and the other kind of man who will become renounced through his advancement in Krishna consciousness, but his fundamental nature is not renounced. By renounced, I don't mean renounced from things in general, but I mean renounced from the need or desire to be with a woman. For example, I didn't see that kind of renunciation in myself as my nature. So it's like you take a woman and say, do you want to get married or not get married? You might find a rare woman who'll say, no, I don't want to get married. But most women will say, I want to get married. Why? Because it's their nature. Now, they may read in the Bhagavatam and say, well, household life is an entanglement. But it's just nature of a woman to be married. So most men have that nature that they want to be combined in a relationship with a woman. It's not even a conscious thing. It's just a conditioning. It's just their nature. It just feels normal and feels awkward for them to function without it. And when they function without it, they start thinking about women that they could function within it. Now, the man who's renounced, like you find brahmacharis who never marry, brahmacharis who become sannyasis, and they have no difficulty. They just don't have, it's just their samskaras, their nature. They just don't have that need. It's not on their mind. It's not even part of their psyche or their programming. They're not fighting it off. It's just how they are. It's like, you know, they're very nice to women, they're very compassionate, very kind, but there's no attraction in their mind. They don't need a woman to inspire them. And in fact, many of those men, if they tried to be married, they couldn't do it. They just that combination, it's not there. You can imagine, you know, taking a man who has this real sannyas samskar and putting with a woman and kids. I don't think he could function in it. He wouldn't. It just wouldn't work. It'd be, you know. But you take a man who has these samskars and then you give him sannyas, and then we've seen what's happened. How many sannyasis couldn't maintain it? Because they didn't have that nature. They had the desire, they had the renunciation in other ways, they wanted to be sannyas. But by their samskar, by their nature, they were, how do we say, I don't say attracted, but it was just their nature was to function within a family with a wife and children. You know, many men have extremely strong desire to have children. So when one becomes a brahmachari, he's giving up the desire to have kids, which is a huge desire. It's a big area of renunciation. I have many godbrothers who, as brahmacharis, thought they would never get married, but at some point, this desire to have children, to have family, to independence, have their own world, it just came, and it's natural. So, can you overcome it by Krishna consciousness? Well, generally you overcome it by getting married. And then when you're older, you overcome it. And so, when a man goes through household life and he comes out the other end, then he's in the same consciousness of the man, brahmachari, sannyasi, who never needed it. Now they're in the same place. So he recognizes that he has to go through it to get there. That's the only way he's going to get to that renounced area. Now you find many grihastha men, they're very renounced. They live simply, they're scholarly, they're renounced in many ways. But they needed that companionship, that association, that environment, to be steady, to be normal. And through that environment, they work through it. And so when they're older, like in my age, then they're more in the consciousness of those renounced people who didn't need it because they ate the meal, they're satisfied, and they're good. So I think the answer is, it's natural. For a man to be brahmachari or sannyasi, it's more of the exception. It's more difficult, and you find it more in India than in America because it's supported by that culture. There's a culture of renunciation, and the samskars that many Indian boys grow up with are different than the samskars that men in the West have. So, okay, does that answer your question? Okay, we're so behind in the chat that you guys are chatting about things I said 10 minutes ago. Okay. Okay, I have to go way up. You've been chatting. Okay. No, I went too far up. Hold on. Okay. So, I think it's a good answer, Vallabhi. It's natural. Yeah. Marina says, if I have to incarnate in the material and I become a celibate brahmachari, yeah, I think that would be simpler. I also think like that. You know, in answer to your question, Vallabhi, it's like sometimes men get married because they realize they need to do it, but it's not like, it's like there's part of them saying, well, if I didn't need to do it, I wouldn't do it, but I realize I need to do it, so I'm going through it. So it's not like they want to, you know, there's this, they really want to, need to, have to, uncontrollable, but they're looking at more from that this would be good, this is the need I have. It's like eating, you know, you can eat sprouts, you can eat salads, you can eat chocolate cake and ice cream. So it's all eating, but by use of intelligence you decide what to eat. So the same way in family life, a man who's sober, he realizes I need family life, so how do I want to do it? So he doesn't go online looking for the most beautiful bride in Russia and fly her over because, you know, she's just a knockout and he's going to marry her. But he looks for a woman who could support him, who has the same interest, and it's not like because she has blonde hair and blue eyes, she's the one. No, so he's eating healthy, so it's not an impetuous, lustful thing. It's just he realizes he needs it, and with his intelligence he makes the proper choices how to enter household life and how to use it and how to engage it in Krishna's service. So it's just a need he has and he's engaging it. So, that's the answer. Okay. But if you could incarnate as a brahmachari in your next life, yeah, that would make your life simpler. How about not coming back at all? That's even better. Then you don't have to worry. So, anyway, Prabhupada never made any man feel bad when they wanted to get married. Even the sannyasis who wanted to get married, he didn't make them feel bad. And what we've learned, Vallabhi, is that so many sannyasis got married. So we realize that normally you're looking at sannyas, 65, 70, that's like normal. You know, you've ended your household life, you've fulfilled those desires. But when you're looking at sannyas, as many men took in their 20s, 30s, even 40s, the fall down rate is very high. I was just watching a video of a sannyas initiation that Prabhupada gave, and of the 7 sannyasis, 6 of them have given up their sannyas. That was probably in 75. So, so the point is, those men, women would say in that situation, women would say, those men didn't realize that they needed to be married, and they were artificially renounced. And many women in those days, when they would see men taking sannyas, would say, I don't think that man is ready, because women can kind of sense that when a man is not really sexually pure. So my joke is, if you want to decide who's ready to take sannyas, just put that man in front of a bunch of women and let them talk to him, and then they can decide, because they could sense that. Okay. So, times, Dustin says, Mayapur, at times I feel the battle of lust is so transforming and healthy. Other times I feel so defeated. It's a battle, and when you're defeated, then you have to learn why and how. But on our next newsletter, we talk about this, how to deal with this kind of defeat. And Guru Nishta, when's that newsletter coming out? Or did I send it to you to send out, or is it still being edited? I don't know. Anyway, it's about self-compassion, how to be tolerant with yourself and move forward in spite of your failures. So there has to be a healthy psychology to deal with these troubles. But the point I was making is that when we run into difficulties, like Achincha saying, I like nice things. So, and I'm saying, that's normal. You shouldn't feel bad. No women should feel bad that, a woman says, well, I like to have a nice husband, and I like to have a couple kids, 2 or 3 kids, and I like to have a house it's nicely decorated, and I like to have nice saris, and I like to have nice jewelry. So a man, especially a brahmachari, when he hears that, he'll think, you're a devotee, why would you want all those things? But the point is, that's just normal for a woman, devotee and not devotee, it's just normal. So no woman should feel bad that she wants those things. And a man thinks, I like to have a nice wife, attractive, take care of the house, help me in my Krishna consciousness, this and that, we can have a nice relationship. And then the young brahmachari will think, but sex attraction is the cause of bondage, why would you want to do that? And the man will say, well, it's just natural, this is the way men are, they're attracted to women, they're wired this way, they want someone to help them in their Krishna consciousness, they want to have kids. So if we understand these things are natural, then there's no guilty on that side. If there's going to be any guilt, it's that you're not employing them in a Krishna conscious way, in a natural way. Okay, so dust in your conditions. So there's going to be a battle in how to employ it and how to deal with the lust. Sometimes you'll fail, sometimes you win. But if you keep on in Krishna consciousness, you're going to win more of the battles. And at a certain point, you're going to win all of them. You're going to hit a point, anartha nivritti. And now, you win all the battles. You're not winning all the battles yet, but you keep going on in Krishna consciousness and confidence without giving up, knowing that you will someday win all the battles. That's how the process works. So you have to stay encouraged, but you have to try your best and you have to learn from your failures. To be married or not to be married. Okay, good point, Antonio. And now it's time for a Chanakya saying. Yeah. So, Antonio says, to be married or not to be married, that is a question. So, yeah. So here's a saying, Antonio, from Chanaka Pandit. I don't know if I told you this. Antonio's wondering, should I get married or shouldn't I get married? And many men wonder, should I get married or shouldn't I get married? As they look at the pros, they look at the cons. And then some men just look at themselves and say, I don't even know if I could be a good husband, which is a very good question, because I would say, even if you want to get married, you have to take it upon yourself to be a qualified partner before you do it, which is why I give these classes to help you learn how to become qualified. And we're doing a marriage course right now. We did last night, and we're doing tonight, and doing tomorrow night. Many of the things that we're talking about now, and other things where we're doing a lot of exercises where you look at yourself. And last night, Antonio, we asked the question, what wouldn't you like about being married to yourself? So Antonio's going, oh no, I could never be married to myself. I'm too weird. I'm too crazy. That would be like worse than hell. So it's a good exercise. No, I don't know if Antonio might be thinking, that'd be nice. I'm a cool guy. I'm a nice guy. We actually look at both sides. We look at the things you wouldn't like about being married to yourself, and we look at the things you would like about being married to yourself. And then of the things that you wouldn't like, we look at the ones that are really extreme. You know, Antonio says, well, every once in a while I disappear and I go and nobody knows where I am. So I wouldn't like a wife who disappears. Antonio, there's a lovely young lady in Israel, and she does the same thing. Maybe you both should get married. You would never have any fights, because either she would be gone or you would be gone. You'd never be together long enough to fight. So, anyway, here's the Chanaka saying, if you're thinking, should I travel or shouldn't I travel, then you shouldn't travel. And if you're thinking, should I eat or shouldn't I eat, then you shouldn't eat. And if you're thinking, should I get married or shouldn't I get married, you should get married. Now Antonio's scratching his head. You go, what? ¿Qué pasó, amigo? What is going on? So I will explain it. I will explain it. Yes, the workshop's going on, and my recorder has broken, and so I didn't record it. The recorder completely broke down, and I'm trying to arrange to get another recorder if I can, get sent over to India. So yeah, my recorder eats up batteries. The recording should go for 5 hours, and an hour and a half the battery's dead. And so I didn't even bring the recorder with me. Antonio, so Chanaka is saying, he's saying, any man who's thinking, should I get married or shouldn't I, that's an indication he should. Because a man who doesn't need to get married will not be thinking, should I get married? It's just, that's his analysis. So as soon as you think, should I? So Antonio's problem is that he knows he should get married because he's not a renunciate, but he's thinking that he's not really qualified to do it. Because Antonio thinks, you know, there's some things about me that I think would drive a woman crazy, because they drive me crazy, and I'm in this body being driven crazy. Why would I want to drive another woman crazy? And if I drive her crazy, she'll drive me crazy. Is that what you're thinking, Antonio? Something like that? Not only will you be cursed, your wife will be cursed. And Antonio's thinking, why would I ever want to do that to a poor, young, innocent girl, to have her live with a crazy guy like me? And not only would I drive myself crazy, I'd drive her crazy, and we'd both end up in the mental hospital. So, if that's actually true, then I would say, don't get married, because you don't want to drive her crazy and you're crazy. But the actual proactive answer would be, become normal, get your life together, get your consciousness together, learn how to be a good husband, grow up, be mature. That's the actual solution. But in lieu of that solution, then I would advise men, even if they need to be married, even if they're going to go crazy if they don't get married, I would advise men, don't get married, because no woman deserves the pain of having to be married to you. I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I'm saying that in a general way, not to Antonio. To any man who can't be a good husband, no woman deserves to be punished by you. And we're going to wait for Antonio's marriage invitation. You could be waiting a long time. Hey, Chintia, I got 50 Turkish lira the other day when I was in Israel. So, Antonio brings a really good point, and I would address this point to the women also, because by attending all these classes, then we're getting a clear idea of what is proper behavior for men and women. And then you can evaluate yourself against this behavior, and then you can also evaluate whether you feel that you can adopt your behavior and consciousness to be a good husband or a good wife. Because really, if you can't really be a good husband, a decent husband or decent wife, then why should you get married and torture this person? They don't deserve to be tortured by you. And so there are men that I know that understand that they want to get married, but they understand that they can't. They just mentally, psychologically, physically, whatever, they can't be good husbands. And they would like to be, but they can't. Or a woman realizes, I can't be a good wife. I'm not good with people. I'm not good with men, this, that, and the next thing. And they just bear not being married in the realization that it would be worse if I were married. So, Antonio, you have to make that decision. If you think that actually being not married would be the lesser of two evils, then don't get married. Even though you need to be married, then you don't get married, because you realize that if I get married, I'll just degrade this woman, I'll upset her, I'll act in ways which will drive her crazy, she won't be happy. Then a man has to make that decision, to make that sacrifice, to say, I'm just not going to get married, how difficult that may be, because I'm not qualified. I think that's honest, I think it's reasonable, I think it's noble. And of course the other solution is become qualified to be a good husband. So if you think becoming renounced would be easier than getting your act together, and you can actually do it, and when you walk down the street you don't stare at every other woman, or if you do stare at other women, get your act together so you stop staring, then if that's the case, and you have that Shakti in nature, then I think some men should not be married, not because they're renounced, just because they would be dysfunctional in a relationship. And that then would foster their renunciation by realizing I have to become renounced because I would be dysfunctional. I can say for myself, I have a side of me which is very disinterested in material life, like extremely disinterested. And I had that side of me when I was 17 years old. I just was disinterested, nothing really interested. At a certain point in my life, I was just not interested in things. I'd go to school and I would be uninterested. I'd go to college and I'd think, this is stupid, this is uninteresting. And aside from a few interests I had, which were like music was my basic interest, I didn't really have interest in things. And becoming a devotee, it was very, very helpful. But I saw that I had this nature that I couldn't be renounced from female association. I didn't have that samskar. It was very clear to me. I wasn't evolved to that point where I could just be a brahmachari then take sannyas. It would have been very difficult for me. So Antonio, when I got married, it was very hard for me to adapt initially because I had this very strong renunciation nature, which doesn't work in grihastha life. And so, it was a little difficult for my wife and difficult for me to adapt to the nature of what it means to be a grihastha. But that's what it means to be a grihastha. You have to adapt to that. So if you realize that you have a nature and you can't be adaptable, then it's better you don't get married, because you'll drive your wife completely crazy and then she will drive you crazy. So it'll just be a boomerang effect. So that is a point, that maybe it would be easier to be renounced, to be lesser of two evils, than to be in a relationship in which you couldn't function well. So in my life, it was always a challenge, because I wasn't naturally inclined to do all the things that families would do and to take the time and show the affection and the emotion and all these things. It was just, I was trained up as a brahmachari, trained up in renunciation, and you don't show it so much. You're a little more strict. But when you're married, that's the ashram where you show emotion. Of course, a lot of those are saying, but Mahatma, you show so much emotion now. But I think part of the reason I show so much emotion is because I've been married for so long, and it's the place you show emotion. When you have kids, it's all about affection, and hugging, and like that. So, if you have to be able to do those things. So, okay. Now, so, have you had your breakfast? No, it's 8:15. Yeah. This is a good discussion, so let's keep it going. Sometimes the points you bring up, I don't bring up in my normal classes, so this is a very good point, and I think it's, really, if you ask me why am I doing this class on Grihastha life or these workshops, is I really want the men to know what it means to be a husband and the women to know what it means to be a wife, so that you can honor the person you're married to. Because if you don't act as a good husband or wife, you're not honoring that person by playing your role. You're not doing your job as a team member. So Grihastha life is teamwork, and so part of what you do as teamwork is to be a good husband or a good wife. And many men, or perhaps women, but more so men, are in the situation that Antonio's in, where they feel like they're not renounced enough to be single, but they don't feel like they have the qualities necessary to be a good husband, or they don't have the nature to be not a good husband, but just say to have a good relationship, not even a husband, but just have a good relationship with another person because of their own idiosyncrasies or weirdness or whatever. And so it's a very good point. And I would say in those cases, then if you want to get married, it's your job to overcome those difficulties because it's not fair to the woman, or if you can't overcome them, then just remain single. So Antonio says, I think Krishna is the only one who truly loves me for who I am, and lately this has inspired me to completely give my life to him, and I think marriage would be too much of a distraction. I'm actually very happy serving Krishna by serving you and the devotees. So, then if that's how you feel, and you're not disturbed by the thought of a relationship, but actually every time you think of a relationship you realize that it just wouldn't work, it wouldn't be fair to the woman, it would be disturbing to you, and you go on peacefully in your Krishna consciousness, fine, that's better. I would never force you to marry. I would never force anyone to marry who doesn't want to marry, unless they're headed for disaster if they don't marry. So, now Achintya asks a very nice question, can money buy you love? And the answer is yes. Because, and they're thinking, Mahatma, you should be impeached as a guru. You said something that's not shastric. Call the GBC, impeach him, pull him off his throne. You know what they say, that many marital problems, or most, evolve around money. So, if the husband takes care of the wife and gets her what he needs, and the only way he can do that is by going out and working hard to make money, she's happy, and she loves him even that much more. So, should a husband love a wife who's poor? Yes, she should. That's her duty. That's Krishna consciousness. That's Vedic. Does she always love a husband who's poor? Yeah, but she loves the husband who's rich just a little bit more. Actually, what she loves is she loves having all the nice things he buys, and she really appreciates that he can provide for her, because there's some men who don't provide well for women, and when they don't provide well, it creates a strain in the relationship, because she thinks he's the man, he's the bread earner, but he's lazy, and it creates a problem. So indirectly, money does foster love, but it fosters it through the effort of the man to provide for the wife, which is his duty, and the wife appreciates that, and then she reciprocates. You know, if the guy's a drunkard, he doesn't work, he has no money, it's hard to love a guy like that. It's really difficult to love a guy. But a man who's working hard and providing what the wife needs, it's easy for her to love him, and it's one of the things we've been saying in these classes, is that is that men sometimes make it hard for their wives to love them by their behavior. So when he takes nice care of her, it makes it easier for her to love him. So, Guru Nishta was wrong. Dead wrong. Guru Nishta, let's say you and your husband were living in a trailer for the last 4 years, and he was like, getting fired from all his jobs because he was just lazy. You have a harder time loving him, but your husband, he works hard, and he's always, he's upwardly mobile, and he's, you guys almost bought a house, and so even though you don't realize it, it does help the relationship more than if you were living in a trailer and he was, drunk half the time and couldn't keep a job, and too lazy to work, or too rowdy at work that he kept getting fired, and you couldn't even buy, all your saris had holes in them. You could love him for who he is, but it would make it harder. Don't you agree? Paul McCartney was wrong. So of course we know money can't buy love, it can't make you love somebody, but what I'm saying is that it makes it easier for the relationship. It's an oil in the relationship, and there's going to be a lot of squeaks if there are money issues. There's going to be a lot of squeaks in the relationship. And money issues usually mean that a man's lazy. And so it's not just about the money, it's about him not providing. Right? So some women will marry a man who can't provide well, and they just like him and they know he can't provide, and then it's less of a problem. But if he's lazy and doesn't provide, then it's a problem. Yeah. So then, Marina says, like Sudama's wife, we should love a poor man, but it's harder to love a poor man because he's poor. And sometimes it's not hard to love a poor man who works hard and does his best. But I would say for women, I said, you have to understand your nature, because some women can live very simply, they don't need a lot. But some women, like Achincha Singh, she likes nice things. So, like I said, there's nothing wrong if you like nice things. But Achincha, if you really do like nice things, it's going to be really hard to marry a man who can't provide nice things. So, it's just a reality. And, so Guru Nishta might say, I wouldn't mind living in a trailer, and, if my husband he's not making a lot of money, I would live with that, and, we'll just eat rice every day, no sabji. She might say that. And if she says that, then it wouldn't be a problem for her. But if she says, I need nice things and this would be horrible, then it would create a problem in the relationship. So money's not buying you love directly, but it's oiling the relationship. It's setting a foundation upon which the relationship can work better. So, and then you look at Sudama's wife, and, it was hard for her. It's naturally, they didn't have any money, it's hard. So, did they have a good relationship? Yeah, but it was being in some way compromised by the fact that they didn't have money. So, Sudama, Mahatma Sudama. Yeah. I'd like to be like Sudama Brahman, but my wife is more like Sudama Brahman's wife. My wife is, where is the house in Mayapur? When are we going to buy the house and build the house in Mayapur? So women want a house. We live in Mayapur. It's so natural, she wants a house. If we don't own the house, then every few years we have to find another place to rent. Just like now, our rent is going to be up next year in January, so we have to find a place. So my wife is saying, we need a house. So that's normal, that's natural. So I'm like Sudama and she's like his wife. But I don't go ask Krishna for the house. I ask you guys, build me a house, okay? You come to Mayapur, build me a house. I'll live on one floor, you can live on the other floor. Okay. So, I think that answered your question. It's an interesting point. There's another point I want to make, that Anusha and I were having fun with this man that she was talking with, and he was getting a little rambunctious and rebellious about some of the things I told Anusha to tell him. And I think one of the problems is it was coming from a woman, and for this man that was hard to hear. But some of the things didn't make sense to him, and he wasn't appreciating them. But one of the things we have to understand, if you ever run into a situation where you tell somebody something, particularly something I said, that doesn't seem on the surface to be what Shastra is saying, one of the things you have to understand is that what we're saying are just natural laws. This is just how it works. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami made a point along the lines of what we discussed in the past. He said, if you want a woman to be submissive, he's talking to the husband, he said, you have to be submissive to her. Now, if all you... So Marina, come to Mayapur and then we'll get some land and we'll buy a house and you take one floor and we'll take another floor. And that would be fantastic. Yeah, so anyone who wants to live with Mahatma, all they have to do is build him a house in Mayapur. Like a 2-story, 3-story house. And then I'll live on one floor with my family, you live on one floor, and we'll be together all the time. And just call me up and just send me an email and we'll start making arrangements. Anusha's going to find, she's going to look for a guy and she's going to say, I'll marry you on one condition, you build my Guru Maharaj a house in Mayapur. Cool, Anusha. That'd be wonderful. My wife will be very happy with me, and our marriage I'll get 5 bonus points in my marriage. So, so imagine Anusha. Anusha's in Malaysia, and I think in Malaysia men are pretty traditional. Imagine Anusha in Malaysia went up to one of the most traditional men and said, Prabhu, I'm so excited. I want to tell you something my Guru Maharaj said. He said, men should be submissive to women. What do you think he would say? He'd probably kick you out of the temple or thought and say, Anusha, you know, did you fall over and hit your head? You know, did you hear it right? Or you're crazy, you know? Right? So, on surface level, it sounds like that's not our philosophy. So, Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami, when he's challenged like that, he says, just understand that if you're not submissive to her, she's not going to be submissive to you, because she's just going to reciprocate with your caring and your sensitivity and your sharing and so forth. And so he points out, makes a very important point. He said, this is just a matter of the way it is. It's not a matter of saying that's not our philosophy, this or that. It's just how it is. It's just true. So what we hear in a lot of talks is that the women should be this way, the man should be this way. It's very... it doesn't take into consideration human psychology. When you take into consideration of human psychology, then you could understand more deeply what that instruction means. Well, like we say, the husband should be the guru, but what does that mean? It means so many things. It doesn't mean he's a dictator. So, husband serving the wife is also part of being guru. It's natural. It's just the way it works. And if you don't do it, then the wife's not satisfied. And you know, if you want to prove that the laws are true, you just say, ask a woman. If your husband's a dictator, if you have to treat your husband always like a guru and just bow to his feet and serve him on reverence, will you be happy? And 99.999% of the women will say, no, I won't be happy. And the 0.00001 that said, I will be happy, didn't understand the question. So the point is, it's just when you're looking at philosophy, you also have to understand that the world works according to psychology and nature. So when we say things that some people think are not right or not shastric or not what Prabhupada said, it's because they just don't understand there's natural laws that exist and you can't defy them. So, no, Anusha didn't have a proposal. She had a boxing match, I think. For about 3 days, I told her what questions to ask, and he started punching back. And those were good questions. If you want to know the questions to ask a potential mate, just send an email to Anusha, and if he doesn't fight back, then you go further. You know, this guy's a good guy. You told him something, and he humbled himself and said, he's a good candidate. Let's go further. Yeah, Anusha is famous for frying pans, but when Anusha gets married, we're all going to send her rubber frying pans so we can spare her husband of any serious injuries, right? She's going to have... No, but see, Anusha, when she sends frying pans, there's sugar on them. Yes, she's sweet. So frying pans are sweet. So maybe we don't need rubber. Okay, so I think it's time for me to have breakfast. And now, Guru Nishta is very strong. She's a Kshatriya, and she could use frying pans, but she's very self-controlled, so she doesn't. So she's very sympathetic to her husband, and even though she could overwhelm him and overpower him because of her power, she doesn't do it. So she's very controlled. So rubber frying pans don't work. Well, I'm sure Anusha will put sugar on them. So, so all of you women become ideal wives, all of you men become ideal husbands, and then this class will be successful. And we'll all go back to Godhead. And to be ideal husbands and wives, you have to change a lot about yourself, but that's good. We need to improve ourselves. Okay, thank you all for attending. I hope something beneficial came from this discussion. And pass on the good news to all the men you see. Tell them your duty is to become submissive to your wife. I mean, some women will go, my husband's, I don't want a man who's submissive to my wife, but actually they do. They want the man to fulfill their desires. That's, because initially I was saying women are dependent, men are independent, so women want a man to be dependent on to fulfill their desires. It's just natural, it's just normal, right? So when we say the man has to be submissive, he has to be submissive to the dependent nature of the woman to fulfill his desires. That's just the way it is. It's just the law. It's, you know, people want to argue with it. There's nothing to argue, you know. It's just how it is. The woman is dependent, the man's independent. He takes care of her, she's happy. He finds out what his duty is to fulfill her needs. That's his submissiveness. He fulfills her needs, she fulfills his needs. It's just the way it works. If people want to argue, I guarantee you the people that argue the other way are either divorced or have horrible marriages. It's just true, you know, these people who argue, no, it's not like that, it's like this, and this is all feminism, and a woman this and that. They either could never be married, if they were married, they're divorced, or if they're still married, their wife is going nuts. I can guarantee you that. So, something to understand. Thank you all. I'm going to sign off now with a Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.